Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm so excited that you all have decided to join us today. Welcome to Let's Talk Saving and Healing Lives in Flint. I have been looking forward to this one for quite a while. I'm being joined by some fabulous people today with some wonderful minds, and I cannot wait to get into this conversation. For those of you who are viewing, I would encourage you to like and share this video with other people. Even if you're catching us on the replay, go ahead, like, share it, let all your friends and family know that this important discussion is happening. Today, we are going to talk about the life-saving measures that are happening in Flint. Now, I am the Community Relations Coordinator for the Flint and Saginaw area for Gifts of Life Michigan, but outside of working in this area, I am also a lifelong native of this area. I am a graduate of Flint Hamady High School and also a graduate of the University of Michigan Flint. So this conversation means a lot to me. Now, I know that we have a lot of people from all across the state and even from different states who are watching this. So if you've ever been to Flint, go ahead and just drop that in the chat for us. And even if you're watching from somewhere else, put that in the chat so we know where you're from. We are on YouTube, Facebook, and now we're on LinkedIn today. So we have quite the audience. So I'm sure we'll get some great responses. Now, for those of you who are not from the area, you might not be familiar with Flint. So I'm going to share a few really cool facts about the city. Now, we are 66 miles northwest of Detroit. We are also the birthplace of General Motors. We are home to the Flint Institute of Arts, which is the second largest art museum in the state and one of the largest art museums in the nation. We are also home to the Crim Festival of Races, and that race draws runners from around the world, attracting about 50,000 people every August when there's not a national pandemic going on. And we are also home to 3 area hospitals. We are home to McLaren Flint, Ascension Genesis, and Hurley Medical Center. Now, Hurley is a teaching hospital that serves 3 counties and has the region's only burn unit, Children's Hospital, Neonatal ICU, Pediatric ICU, and Pediatric Emergency Department. And Hurley Medical Center was also recognized as Donor Hospital of the Year by Gifts of Life Michigan for 2020. Now, them winning that award, it just reflects the care and the concern that the Hurley staff exhibit. And to loosely quote their donation coordinator, their donation liaison, Valerie Canary, the award is a reflection of the staff's hard work and dedication to support the donation process. It also honors the generous patients and their families who courageously choose the option to save a life. So today we are very grateful to have Dr. Seshwani from Hurley Medical Center with us today. So Dr. Seshwani, how are you today?
Very good. Thank you, Shalanda.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us today. So as I mentioned, Hurley won the 2020 Donor Hospital of the Year. Can you please share with us more about Hurley's life-saving donation efforts?
So at Hurley, if I had to put it, all of us that are part of the donation team have 2 roles to play, and that is engraved in all our staff members here. The first role is that we provide the best care possible to our patients when we are treating them, and then from then onwards, if when the decision for organ donation has been established, whether it has been known that the donor is a registered donor, or their families want to honor their loved one through donation, then my role and our role here at Hurley is for that transition to happen seamlessly. And in order for that to happen, I'm proud to say that I'm part of, I'm a team member. I'm a small part of a team of many individuals that work behind the scenes to make sure that we meet regularly and that we, revise policies, update policies, talk about management strategies, and the most important is education for our community and for the citizens that are here.
Thank you so much for doing that. That really just means so much to those families who are able to donate. And it also means a lot to those families who their loved one's life will be saved by those organs. So thank you so much for the work that you do in that life-saving work. It's fantastic. Now, I would also like to introduce Bruce Nicely to the conversation. Now, Bruce, how are you today?
Hey, I'm great, Shalonda. Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much for being here. Now, Bruce, you are Gift of Life's Chief Clinical Officer, and in that role, you manage organ and tissue donor cases. Is that correct?
That's right, Shalonda. I oversee a really dedicated team, much like Dr. Sashwani was describing in his facility. We have it takes a lot of folks to make donation happen beyond that very, very generous donor and family. So I have the privilege of overseeing that effort for organ and tissue donation for Gift of Life Michigan.
So, what can you share with our viewers about organ and tissue donation in the Flint area specifically?
So first and foremost, probably the message I want to try to reinforce is organs are very, very much needed. There are certainly patients from the Flint area who are on a waiting list for an organ. There are around 114,000 people nationwide whose lives hang in the balance waiting for an organ to save their life because of end-stage organ disease. Flint is not immune, unfortunately, like the rest of the world, from bad things happening to people. And when those tragedies strike, sometimes it can be tough to remember donation, to even hear about donation when people are experiencing grief. But donation matters quite a lot because transplantation saves lives. So in Flint and everywhere else, donation matters. Signing up on the registry, making that choice in the absence of a registry, it really, truly matters. And I think we're actually going to hear a little bit more about that later in this discussion, Shalonda. So donation matters. Gift of Life Michigan there is to support the healthcare team. We're there to support the families through a very, very difficult time, which we understand from many, many donor families we've worked with. Despite the tragic loss, there's a chapter of hope that this donation brings. And it has been repeatedly and consistently very comforting to donor families to know that their loved one helped someone. So that's kind of our mission in a nutshell, Shalonda.
Okay. Thank you so much for the hard work that you do. It is most appreciated by all those who are affected by it. Thank you so very much, Bruce. Now, my third guest is Dr. McCullough, and just looking at the comments here, I see that you have quite the fan club. Before we even have introduced you, Brittany Swartz tells us Dr. McCullough is the greatest. So let me introduce our audience to you. Now, Dr. McCullough, you are the president of the Michigan State Medical Society, and that is a professional society that represents more than 15,000 doctors and medical students in the state. Policies involving public health, healthcare delivery, and medical ethics are set annually by the Medical Society. And aside from being the president of that organization and being a practicing physician, the love you have for Flint is very, very evident. You and your son, I know in the early days of COVID-19, you were printing 3D masks that offered more protection than the traditional mask, and they were used at places such as outpatient clinics and long-term care facilities. And you're also a very familiar face on the local news here. You keep us updated about COVID-19 and ways our community can stay safe. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for all the work that you're already doing. But you have such a strong devotion to public health, and we're so honored to have you here. Can you share with us why donation is important to you?
Sure. Thanks, Shalonda. I very much appreciate that introduction. It's important to me because, being in medicine, we train and work so hard, whether you're a nurse, whether you're a therapist, whether you're a doctor, to preserve life and improve life. I mean, that's our purpose of existence. That's our calling in life. And we have a belief that we should leave the world better than we found it, right? I mean, that's sort of my personal belief, is that I should, there's a saying that says that when we're born, we're crying and everybody's smiling, but when we're gone, we're smiling and everybody's crying, right? And that sentiment is just that we should leave our legacy in the world in a way that makes people appreciate our presence, and that also that our death should be meaningful, that it should mean something, and that because of leaving this legacy and a meaningful death, with our work while we're alive and with our body after leaving this world. And so these are all the sentiments that sort of lead me to be passionate, and why I'm here with you today about organ donation. And as someone that's in the state and national medical society, as you mentioned in the intro, through the Michigan State Medical Society and the American Medical Association, I see sort of the physical and economic cost of prolonged treatment for end organ failure, right? Whether it's liver, whether it's kidney, whether it's something, that this really takes a toll on people. And it's an economic toll on the country. And therefore, if there is a better way to treat chronic disease, and in this case, transplantation is that better way, then we should work to improve our transplantation rates, right? To improve the quality of life, to decrease the cost, and to help people when they've left this world leave that legacy behind, that their families can be proud of, right? That they can look and see that the loss of this loved one wasn't meaningless, that it was meaningful because of that legacy. And so those are the reasons that I feel passionately about organ donation.
That's beautiful. I agree with everything you just said. Thank you for sharing those sentiments with us. I was just looking at some of the comments here, and I see one from Randy McCary. She says that my son passed in an accident when he was 19 in Flint at Hurley. He was an organ donor and my hero, Gage. And because of him, all of his friends changed their status to donor status on their license. Randy, thank you for sharing that with us. We're very sorry to hear about the loss of your son, Gage, but it's so great that he was able to be a hero and help save the lives of someone else. So his legacy is living on. Not only has he saved the life of someone else, he also influenced his friends who will one day do the same thing. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. And now I'm going to introduce two people to the conversation who can really understand how important organ and tissue donation is, because they are organ recipients and their lives have literally been saved by someone saying yes to donation. Now, my first guest is Londell Cook. Londell Cook is a Flint native who currently lives in Saginaw, and he received a kidney transplant 2 years ago. How are you, Londell? I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yes.
Yes. And I also have Alina Christian, who is also another
No
native
problem.
of Flint, or a Flintstone as we're so affectionately referred as. And she is a liver recipient. She is 6 years with her liver that she has named Nacho because it's Nacho liver. How are you, Alina?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Good. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Now, I was wondering if you could all please tell us about your transplant story. Alina, do you wanna tell us what led up to you needing a liver transplant, please?
In the early 2000s, I was diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis, which is a chronic liver disease. I knew from an early age that I would need a transplant, but it wasn't until my late 20s, around 2012, that I actually went into end-stage liver failure.
Okay. So tell us about your journey from getting your liver. I know at first you had a sister who was going to be your donor, but that changed.
Yes, I had both of my sisters went through the process of seeing if they were able to be a donor, and one sister was unable, but the other sister was. So we had a set surgery date, but as things progressively got worse, I ended up getting a donor November 1st, 2014.
Fantastic. I'm so glad that worked out. Now, Londell's back. Can you hear me, Londell?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can, yes. Londell, can you tell us about your transplant story? Oh, looks like we might still be having some audio issues with Londell. So, oh wait, he's coming back. So let's see if that works. Nope. Okay. Well, while we wait for Londell, I'm going to ask you some more questions, Selena. Now, before your
So I
diagnosis,
was having a situation.
can you hear us, Londell? Nope. Okay. So, Alina, before your diagnosis, I know your mom was she's a retired nurse. So, was donation a part of your conversation? Was it something you all talked about before you got sick?
Yes, I knew from an early age that one day I was going to need a transplant.
Okay. So, were you also a registered organ donor before your transplant?
Yes.
Okay. So that's something I think people should really keep in mind too. If you are waiting for a transplant, or even if you're a transplant recipient, you still have the ability to become a registered organ donor. So that's really great that you were able to still do that. Now, how has your life been post transplant? You've had 6 years with Nacho. How has life changed from before you received Nacho to now?
Well, in when I went on the transplant list, I had to stop working. I had to stop going to school, and I really just spent all my time at home waiting. I had ascites and varices, and I wasn't able to do much. So now that I've received my transplant, I've gone back to work full time. I'm a student at U of M Flint pursuing a computer science degree, and life has, for the most part, returned back to normal.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Alina, you're always so fun. I always love hearing about your story, your before and your after. I know you've shared some pictures with me of your life before your transplant, and you really did do a 180. So I'm so very, very glad that you received that transplant. Let's go back to Londell. Londell, are you able to hear me now? No? All right. So, Alina, how do you honor your donor? Have you had a chance to meet or communicate with your donor?
So I've written to the family, but at this time, I don't actually know who my donor is. All that I know is that she was an older woman.
Okay. Okay. Great. Now, how do you let people in the community know about donation? How are you involved with spreading the message?
I do a lot with the gift of life. Really, any opportunity I have to share my story with others, I do. And I just let everybody know, and the people who love and care about me know that I'm here today because she made that choice to be a donor.
Mhm. That's fantastic. Now, I know that hospitals also honor donors by doing something called an honor walk. You may have seen those on YouTube. I recently had the opportunity to see one in person just this week. And I know Hurley has had honor walks in the past. Dr. Sachwani, can you share what those honor walks are like with our audience, please?
Absolutely. The way that here at Hurley we honor the donor and their families is we do an honor walk, which consists is that when the decision, when the organ donation is going to happen and they are being transferred to our surgical suites or to a different, here at Hurley to our surgical suite or to a different center, an announcement is made, and the most beautiful thing happens. The corridors that lead to whether it's the suite or whether they're being transferred outside from our hospital is just lined with hospital staff that comes and shows the support to the donor and their families, and then we basically just line all the corridors to see them go through, and basically that's how we show our support to them.
That's beautiful. I know it means a lot to the families that that takes place, that their loved one is being honored in such a beautiful way by the entire staff. So thank you all for participating in those at Hurley. Let's see. Londell, can you hear me?
My every time.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can. Yay, fantastic.
Can
So,
you hear me?
Londell, can you tell us about your transplant story?
Yeah, the
Oh,
link was kicking out. So
okay. I'm gonna come back to you. I'm gonna
yes.
see if it works out for you.
So I was a direct donor. I had been on dialysis.
Okay. So, Bruce, I'm gonna come back to you. Now, I know we hear a lot about organ donation, and that's super important, but there's also bone and tissue donation that can help others. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Sure, Shalonda. I mentioned a few minutes ago there's probably about 114,000 people on the national waiting list for an organ. What people may not know is there are about 2 million tissue implants done every year in the United States. The one people probably recognize most readily is skin. So skin is frequently used in burns, and it is that becomes a life-saving donation for sure because that donated skin provides a truly critical barrier for the recipient's own body to try to heal underneath. Um,
Bruce, can I
it's
chime
somewhat
into that?
temporary, but without it, those patients can succumb to massive infections, and it definitely can die depending on the severity of the burn. As you mentioned, their bone it can be formed into various grafts that are used in neurosurgical procedures, orthopedic procedures. Probably a lot of us know somebody who has torn their ACL, their anterior cruciate ligament in their knee. Many of the ACL repair operations use donated tissue. So there's a host of ways in which donated tissue is used. I'll also mention heart valves, for example. So we think about the heart beating, and the heart is certainly an organ that gets transplanted. But there's also a need for the valves within a heart for folks who might have a congenital issue or they contracted something that destroyed their valves within their heart. Those two kind of fall into the life-saving category because a lot of recipients of heart valves are small children, even as young as infants. So those are some examples, Shalonda, of the ways in which tissue helps other people that a lot of us really don't think about because lots of us have heard of organ donation and transplantation. We have two fantastic examples of the ways in which that benefits us. But tissue, probably many of us, most of us probably know somebody who's gotten a tissue graft who may not even have known it.
Dr. Sashwani, were you wanting
Yeah,
to say something?
I wanted to add to what Bruce said. You know, here at Hurley, we are part of a trauma team. We are trauma surgeons, but we're also burn surgeons. And we alluded to the use of donated skin is very important to us because we deal with a lot of deep burns. And in order to get them through their healing process, we do have to apply this donated tissue. So then we can come back and take care of them with hopefully their own skin. So that's what I wanted to allude to.
So I can tell you from personal experience in 2018, my late husband, he burned his foot and he needed a skin graft and he spent about 2 weeks at Hurley and he received a skin graft and it actually allowed him to keep his foot. He would have lost his foot without it. So I can attest to how important skin and just tissue donation in general it is. I know it's something we don't often think about, but it's vital. It is very, very important. Now, so the need for transplants in some communities can be disproportionately high, and frequently it's to things such as high blood pressure or diabetes. How can we increase awareness in those communities? And that's from whoever would like to answer.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, I think awareness is something that it's not something that a billboard would create, but stories tend to create it. And I think that there's a lot of perhaps misconception theories about organ donation that confound our ability to get people comfortable with making that decision. I think it starts with this is a moment of loss for a donor's family, and so it starts with sort of respect for that loss, respect for the dying, support of the sentiment of creating a legacy of that lost family member, and then again the positive feelings of support for the surviving family, and then also an explanation of the process. Right? I think a lot of people, we live this every day in medicine, but it is so foreign to a non-science trained person about how do you take a kidney out of somebody, or a portion of their liver, or those sorts of things. It's like a science fiction exercise in their mind. And I think just explaining the process, the non-disfiguring nature of the process, whenever it is they're comfortable to have that conversation, and also assurance that the process, that nothing is premature. Right? I think there's a lot of negative sentiment about a push for donation means premature sort of declaration of death of a patient, and that nothing could be further from the truth. But it takes some conversation to get somebody to be comfortable with that decision. So, getting people comfortable, supporting them in their moment of need, being human to them, is the first step. And then the next step is sort of having that conversation about the legacy. And honestly, I think that, for example, even something as simple as blood donation just gets people used to the idea that something I have can be useful to somebody else, even when I'm alive, as was already mentioned, but particularly after my passing. And so I think that's the type of conversation that changes the narrative around and will help us to improve our ability to take care of each other when it comes to organ donation.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more, especially what you shared about sometimes people believe that if they are a registered organ donor, the medical team will not work as hard to save their life. And that's absolutely false. Full transparent moment, I did not become an organ donor until my husband needed a kidney transplant, because I had always heard that if you're an organ donor and you end up in the hospital, the doctors won't save your life. And that's something that I had heard from my grandmother. So why would I doubt my grandmother? So education really is key. Just talking to people, making sure that they're comfortable with the process. Bruce or Dr. Seshwani, would you like to add anything to that?
I love Dr. McConnell's summary. It's beautiful and very accurate. I think one of the things that we find ourselves doing nowadays, Shalonda, is battling misinformation. So much as you heard from your grandmother, that somewhere along the way those things crop up, they spread. Remember, this is not a topic people want to spend a lot of time thinking about: death and dying and donation. So a lot of the conversations, unfortunately, don't really happen ahead of time. If someone signs up on the registry, that helps tremendously, because the family at least has an indication what their loved one wanted. By and large, though, in the community, I think any opportunity we can find to the facts about donation, to understand and reiterate that it really is needed. It really does work. A lot of folks don't even know that transplantation works, despite people like our two wonderful examples here. The two, as Dr. McConnell said, understand the process. It's not rushed. There are many, many safeguards built into the process, both within the hospitals. And then when we become involved, we go behind with yet another whole series of double checks. Nothing is rushed. The healthcare team has tried everything to save a life. Sometimes, as we all know, nature dictates otherwise. So every opportunity to spread facts and to dispel misinformation help increase the awareness and support for donation.
Mm-hmm. Very, very true. I want to just look at some of these comments here. I see one from Andrea Christian Domino, and she says, Alina is my sister. In her transplant, we have been able to enjoy and love her here on earth because of her donor. Her transplant has changed all of our lives. Her donor and family, in the worst time, chose to bless our family with a gift of life. We honor her donor every holiday. Even though I live in Utah with my husband and kids, in most holidays, I'm not with my family in Flint. That is wonderful. And also, Lena, your mom says she's proud of you. Dr. Seshwani, did you want to add anything to that question?
Honestly, no. They both from Dr. Mukamala and Bruce. They touched all the points. I just wanted to add. I grew up in Spain, a country that, believe it or not, it is the highest. It has the highest donation rate in the world, and that is through because they have this. Once you turn 18, you are considered a donor, and you have to actually opt out from that from that donation. You have to opt out in order to not be a donor. And even though the same systems that we have here regarding communication and getting the families involved, that also goes through, even though, like I said, you have to opt out from being a donor. So being a donor, in my background, has been it's been a staple. It's like a given. To be honest, it's a given. And the points that were mentioned regarding, there are four things that are crucial in organ donation, and to make it a very how do I put it, a natural process, and one is that there's a lack of knowledge. And like Dr. Mukamal and Bruce said, through events like these, we increase awareness. Even smaller events can educate people within communities that may not have access to this technology. So it takes tremendous effort to reach out our communities. Like Dr. Mukamal mentioned, that there's some form of distrust towards the medical team. And that's where I think, so we as physicians, and together with the Gift of Life team, we can improve on that. We can improve on the communication and the dialogue and the discussion that needs to happen in those crucial moments, and for the families. And then, of course, there's always the traditional and cultural beliefs that the more we engage our community leaders, our spiritual leaders, I'm sure we can overcome this hurdle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what you said. I think it's very important that we do work with our community leaders, people who are already considered trusted voices in the community, be it your pastor, or maybe there is a trusted politician or teachers, people like that who people already trust. So that is what we try to do in our outreach efforts, reach those communities, because we know not everyone is going to come to a health fair and hear about donation, because no one wants to talk about dying.
Mm-hmm.
And as important as organ donation is, it does involve someone passing away, and that's not something people really like to think about. But there are also ways that you can donate while you are still living. Bruce, do you want to talk about living donation?
Absolutely. Living donation has been an extraordinary opportunity for folks who are suffering end-stage organ failure. Kidney is probably the most common example. We have two kidneys. Most of us are born with two kidneys, and we can donate one, and typically without any effect whatsoever. The other one takes on the rest of the work, and we can do okay with that. There are also examples, though, of a segment of the liver. The liver has tremendous power to regenerate, and so we can conceivably donate a segment of our own liver to someone else who needs it, and both the recipient and the donor will be just fine. There are examples of donating a lobe of a lung, even. And so someone with end-stage lung disease can benefit from a generous living donor who's able to give them one of the lobes of their own lung. So there are some extraordinary examples. Even beyond that, there have been a few examples of folks, women donating a uterus, for example, for women who don't have one or have a non-functioning uterus, and that enables them to carry a baby. So living donation is just a tremendous opportunity. When the match is there, it's a beautiful thing. So those are a few examples of ways in which living donors help people.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Just looking here at some of the comments, I see Shelly Larson, double transplant patient, kidney pancreas, 13 years. So thankful for the donor every day. Tamar, I hope I'm saying that right. Tamar Pleasant Swain says, one of my best friend's life was saved by liver transplant. Thank God for gifts of life, true blessing. Regina Chandler says, my grandson's life was saved by a liver transplant. I thank God for that gift to him every day. So you can really see how organ donation affects people every day. People who we might not know have a story. There's a good chance that they could be touched by donation, and it really does save lives. Ann Bergman Christian said, I did not receive an organ from Alina's donor, but by her giving my daughter her liver, she also healed my broken heart. The impact of needing and then getting a transplant has powerful and profound impact on the family too. That is beautiful. It really, really does. Bruce or Dr. McCummler or Dr. Sishwani, have any of you had conversations with donor families? How do they express how, even though they lost their loved one, they still find joy knowing that they're able to help another family?
Certainly, I've
I
had many conversations with donor families over the years. And, yeah, I'm always struck first and foremost by their grace. Through the grief, to be able to go through that process strikes me always as extraordinary, and as is just incredibly selfless. Yet they feel, in my experience with most of the families I've worked with, they feel compelled to honor their loved one's legacy through donation. And I cannot count the number of times I had a family say to me, if we can prevent someone else from suffering a loss, and if our loved one can live on, this is absolutely something we want to do. And that has been a consistent theme through all my decades in this field, and it's extraordinary every time.
Mhm. I think you were going to say something as well, Dr. Sishwani.
definitely, we taking care of patients here, Hurley, you do get close, very close to the families, when they make that decision, and it just resonates, through all the instances we have here at Hurley. They always say, this is what he or she would have wanted. It just resonates through the entire staff and with us, the physicians. So what a more beautiful way to honor that donor than with your family, saying these things and having, the entire support of the medical team behind that.
Mm-hmm. So, along with the donor walks that you have had at Hurley, you guys also have a donor wall. Can you tell us about that donor wall?
Oh yeah, the donor wall, again, it's to honor and to kind of like show the beautiful picture of that donor, and kind of like their, sometimes it has a date, or sometimes it has a motto that they had, and we make it, you kind of like make it visible to, again, to the entire staff, all the patients that come in, or even their families. Whoever walks through the halls of our hospital can see that, these people were, the selfless act, did save someone's life.
Mm-hmm. And also here at Gifts of Life Michigan, we have a yearly donor family gathering where we honor the family of those who've lost loved ones in the previous year. There's a slideshow. We get to learn a little bit about the family members. There's also donor quilts that we have. People are able to add a quilt square that has a picture of their loved one, and maybe it might have a favorite saying, or just something that they remember about that person when they were still here. And they hang throughout our offices here at Gifts of Life Michigan to remind us that we do honor life through donation, and just how important the work we do is, because we're working with people and families and lives. And it's very touching. I feel very honored to be part of this community. Okay, I see a comment here from Deb. She says, you both know my story of living donation from my kidney sister. Love and miss you all. I know that Deb received a kidney transplant from a church member of hers a couple years ago. I believe she just celebrated her second or maybe third kidney anniversary. She received it from a living transplant recipient. So yeah, there are many ways where donation is touching lives. So if I asked any of you, well, I'm going to ask all of you, if I asked you all for your 30-second elevator speech about donation, why organ, eye, and tissue donation is important, what would you say to me? We'll start with Dr. Sishwani.
If you want, donation is important to me because, you're truly saving someone's life, and you're honoring the donor that's passing away. That's how I see it.
How about you, Alina?
I received my transplant right before my 30th birthday. And, I don't think I was ready to leave this earth at 30. And I'm just so thankful that she made that decision to be a donor because she truly saved my life. And I'm here today because of her.
Dr. McCullough.
I mean, I guess my 30-second pitch would be that, our goal should be to leave this world better than we found it. And there's really no better way to do that than to ensure that our legacy lives on, instead of the sorrow that would surround my passing. Instead, I will leave a legacy of happiness and a family, and we continue to live on through that memory. And so creating that legacy and leaving the world better than we found it, I think, are the main reasons that we should encourage organ donation.
Okay. And Bruce.
Dr. Shoshana and Dr. McCullough summed it up so beautifully. I think what I would want to say to people is each of us has the opportunity to make the intent of a gift that can save or change someone else's life, not just the recipient either. It's been striking to me how comforting donation is to the family of the donor. Years that pass after that event. A profound moment of loss can turn into an extraordinary opportunity of hope for the recipients and their communities, and the donor's family and their communities.
I thank you all for your time and your expertise today. I also would like to thank our audience for their beautiful comments and some of the questions that they also put into the chat. If you have any more questions, or if you're interested in joining the Michigan Organ Donor Registry, I would encourage you to go to the Gift of Life Michigan website, and you can find that at golm.org. Also, check out the Hurley Medical Center and the Michigan State Medical Society website to learn more about what these two wonderful organizations are doing. I once again want to thank all of you for joining us today, and I hope that you all have a great and beautiful day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.